So we're in the middle of a global pandemic and economic shutdown that threatens to collapse civilization itself. So of course, YouTube is now going to start exploding over Dune 2020 being a woke movie and having a racial and gender swapped character. Because that's important right now. What's up, folks? It's your old pal King Waspinator here. So yeah, images have come out in the last few days from Vanity, or is it Variety? One of those damn entertainment magazines, with the first glimpses of Denis Villeneuve's Dune, scheduled supposedly to come out at the end of this year, albeit with the movie theater chains already starting to fall apart and the studios not as far behind them as people would like to think, in all likelihood. Who's to even say that Dune 2020 is ever going to come out at all? It might end up being Dune 2022, if ever. But okay, apparently, something we've already known since last summer, and that is that Liet Kynes is going to be replaced with a black woman instead of a traditionally cast white male. And so, of course, the internet's gonna go on fire, and I guess my opinion on it is kind of designed in a way that I should hopefully piss everyone off with this, because I got two takes specifically on the racial gender swapped Liet Kynes right off the bat. Okay, to all the people acting like this is a good thing, and screw those fandom menace guys. We'll show them we're doing the right thing for equality. We're going to make Liet Kynes proud black woman. Well, congratulations once again for patting yourselves on the back for being handed the scraps off the white man's table. Liet Kynes is a minor ass character. There's nothing to be getting too big of a toot over. Now, if they had changed the Atreides family to be black, that would be a different story. And actually, years ago, I remember getting into an argument with somebody about that very point of there's really no reason why they couldn't be. It's in excess of 10,000 years in the future. The year 10,191 that Dune starts off with, that's not our calendar. That's not the Gregorian calendar. It's detached. That the year 10,191 means it's 10,191 years since Earth was nuked, and that's like 10,000 years in between now and Dune. So Dune is a long time in the future. Long enough that any of our current modern racial distinctions aren't going to exist anymore. Even if you do have pockets of humanity that, down at their core, might still be largely from a blood pool of people that we consider one of our modern races, they wouldn't think of themselves that way. They wouldn't be attached to any of that history. I mean, we're talking about a society that has largely forgotten figures like Jesus and Muhammad and Moses. The Earth is just kind of a vague memory and legend because it's been gone for so long. To characters within Dune being white, black, Asian, whatever, means nothing to them in the way it means stuff to us. They're completely detached from our context. So on the surface, it shouldn't matter. But I'd be more impressed if they had done, a more higher profile, important character to the series. Now, the character that should have been race swapped to become a black person, if there was to be one done in this movie, would have been Duncan Idaho, Jason Momoa's character. Jason Momoa, to me, is actually the worst casting in this movie. If you understand anything about the ongoing series of books that Frank Herbert himself wrote, even ignoring all the stuff that Brian Herbert and Kevin Anderson wrote, just the Frank Herbert books alone, the main character across all of them, which spends thousands of years by the time it's all said and done, the main character is Duncan Idaho. And in most of those books, he's a Gola clone who's trained to be a mentat. The superhuman thinking, living human computer guys, trained by the Bene Tleilax. Jason Momoa, a mentat. Up there with Peter de Vries and Thufir Hawat. Jason Momoa. He's the guy that you're going to tap to play a character who's a human computer. I mean, I get the Swordmaster of Janaz angle on that front, sure. And Duncan Idaho was always, described in the books as being extremely attractive to the ladies, and ladies certainly like Jason Momoa. But there's also a lot of other aspects of how Duncan Idaho was physically described that it'd be perfectly appropriate if Duncan Idaho was a black guy. My personal choice of who I thought would have been a good Duncan Idaho under those circumstances would have been someone like Chiwetel Ejiofor. So, I don't know. Am I racist? I think Duncan Idaho should be black, but I also say that having Liet Kynes become a black woman, it scraps, man. It scraps. That's a character that's barely in the story. More of a background character, a character you get to know in the appendices, more so than you ever get to know reading the actual book. So, I don't, it's really nothing to be, proud of, and it's really nothing to be angry about either. I guess, once again, I find myself in that situation where I just, both sides have their points, but both sides are also misguided and wrong. And I guess the other things about Dune now being woke. Dune was always woke, even though obviously in the 60s that wasn't really a term that we use the way we use it now. Many years ago, my sister, who's about 15 years younger than me, she's in high school, I got her to read the Dune books. And when she got to God Emperor Dune, which is my favorite of the Dune books, I remember her coming up to me and talking to me about it and declaring kind of in a puzzled voice that, this is a really oddly feminist book, and I wasn't expecting that. And that's the trick to Dune. Yes, at the beginning it does seem to be like a lot of male characters in positions of authority. But the thing is if we could ever get past just making readaptations of just the first handful of stories in Dune and actually get all the way through it at some point to a larger film-going audience, one would actually finally get a chance to see with your eyes that what Dune, the saga, is depicting is the slow process of changing a society from a very rigid, feudalistic patriarchy to a society that is decentralized and largely run by female authority figures. In God Emperor of Dune, one of the big changes that Leto II has been doing to the universe is stripping away military function from the males and creating a female army. Because a female army can subdue the populace not just through violence, but also because of the fact that men are easily subdued and tamed with sex. Which I guess is more that first wave kind of feminism, obviously, and not where feminism is at now. But, God damn it, you idiots. That damn hipster Quinn, formerly Ideas of Ice and Fire, he's just a little too blindly into it. I tried getting in on one of his chats on a live stream earlier, and it's not real inviting kind of place if you want to say anything even remotely controversial or poking the bear. And then I just saw a video from Jeremy at Geeks and Gamers where he can't even say Kynes right. Kynes. Liet Kynes. I guess there's the clickbait thing. I mean, hell, I'm making this video. There's an obvious clickbait angle. But I've been a Dune fan since I was 8. Younger than that, counting the movie. In terms of the first time I tried to pick up and read that book, though, I tried reading it when I was 8. I'll admit, the first time I read it, first couple times I read it, I basically just stuck to the Paul chapters and skipped over all the stuff about the older characters like the Baron and whatnot. But, that's 33 years of being a Dune fan. I feel personally authorized to have an opinion on this damn thing. In so many ways, it's nice. Like, I've been looking forward to this Dune movie with fingers crossed. I think Villeneuve is a little overrated. His movies look really nice. Blade Runner 2049. It was really good, but it had something missing from it that the original Blade Runner had, and I think the original Blade Runner kind of had a bit of that Jaws magic of there were some accidents and changes and the way the movie ended up coming out as opposed to how it was originally intended to come out made it a better entity, so to say. Some of its parts kind of a thing. And in that department, I felt that, Blade Runner 2049 was missing something. Not to detract from the fact that it was really good. It's akin to saying, like, the Hobbit movies were good movies, but when you compare the Hobbit movies to the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit movies suck. But compared to other movies contemporary to them, they're perfectly fine movies. It's just the thing that came before it set a really high bar, and that's kind of how I feel about the Blade Runner films. I did not like Arrival. I know that's somewhat sacrilege. I appreciate the ideas in it. I appreciate how it was filmed. I appreciate the acting, all of that stuff. I appreciate the science fictionness of it. But it was also kind of boring, and I thought the end was too much of a bummer. So, it's just not my thing. So, I'm okay. Dune might be good, hopefully. It's got a lot of good things going for it. In many cases, up until this fucking fake controversy over Liet Kynes that's now is going to be erupting. Otherwise, I approve of the casting decisions they're making. Like, for one thing, the Fremen are supposed to, kind of look like Middle Easterners. A little bit, maybe. Just a little bit. In the David Lynch movie, they look like a bunch of white biker guys just wearing rubber suits. There's a lot of things about this film that should be fine. Delving a little bit more into the Bene Gesserit and giving Jessica an enhanced role, perfectly fine. Considering, as I said, the overarching story of the Dune saga in terms of the world development for the Galactic Empire itself is, as I said, in the earliest books, it is a rigid feudal patriarchy where females are not ever seen in centralized authority roles, with the lone exception of the Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Bohème. But by the end of it, once you get past God Emperor Dune and into Chapter House Dune and Heretics of Dune, like I said, decentralized society, women in charge. The whole last 2 books are all about the Bene Gesserit versus the Honored Martyrs. So, I don't know what to tell you guys. I think we are kind of at a point where maybe the best thing for Hollywood to do is to dial back on all this a little bit, because it is a double standard when it comes to character cultural appropriation in fictional works, let's say. And maybe it would just be best to quit poking the bear. Make some original properties. Or, just do my thing of just quietly do it. Don't say much about it. Do not publicly pat yourself on the back over it. Just let the product stand for itself. To the other side, I will say, there is a lot of talk about, we want people hired not for their skin color or their gender. We want people hired for their merit. Well, at what point is the person being hired actually being hired for their merit? If they want Idris Elba to play James Bond, is it because Idris Elba is black? Or is it because Idris Elba is a really hot commodity and women love him? Sounds like merit to me. I don't know. I mean, right off the bat, I'm not even allowed to be talking about this because of my skin color, which is in itself a terribly racist thing. We're in the middle of a fucking apocalypse, people. Everyone's tense. Tempers flare very easily over little tiny minor things. Now is really not the time to keep digging in on keeping us all separated and not ever allowed to talk any sort of issues out, because we always have to make everything into some gigantic cesspool of offense and awkwardness. At some point it's got to end. I am sure I will be fine with Dune 2020 whenever it does finally get released, if ever. I do not think the relatively minor role that Liet Kynes has and the little tiny adjustments they would have to make in her character background is it going to have any sort of terrible effect. It's certainly not going to travel back in time and ruin my childhood enjoyment of Dune and the Dune novels. Maybe it might enhance my enjoyment of the Brian Herbert novels. There's really not much that can be done to make me feel any worse about those books. But it's not going to do anything to detract from Frank Herbert's work. So, this is just so tiring. You just, like, no matter what, you just get it from both ends. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. If they hadn't made any changes at all to Dune and had cast it basically the same way they cast it in the David Lynch movie, then people would be complaining about how it's just a bunch of white guys. And by changing one of the characters, people are going to be complaining that it's not just a bunch of white guys. It's a Chinese finger trap. So, yeah. Well, anyway, on that cheerful note, be sure to hit like and subscribe. And until next time, stay waspinated.